Alors, là, je vais faire un point sur le groupe parce que je ne l'ai pas fait pour l'instant. Vous me dites rapidement oui si vous êtes là et voilà. C'est surtout. Alors, Marine Bartolini, oui. Ilona, elle arrive, d'accord, mais elle est bien dans le groupe. Fanny Belair, ouais. Félicia, ouais. Solange Brumat, ouais. Pauline Charrier, Élise Chéry, ouais. Jérémy Chopin. Jérémy, il n'est pas là. Vous savez s'il est bien dans ce groupe? Vous ne connaissez pas. Ashraf Wishi. Lucas Colombin. Je crois qu'il est dans ce groupe. Julia Costa. Ouais. Ce n'est pas pour voir qui est présent ou pas, c'est pour être sûr que tout le monde est dans le bon groupe, parce qu'après ça pose des problèmes aux examens. Florie Crinchon. Oui. Marie Lafonte. Ouais. Jessica Darbois. Ouais. Alessia Demilitio n'est pas arrivée. Élise Dehé, ouais. Alexandra Delamotte, ouais. Viviane, ouais. Arthur Donner, voilà. Victor Gabriel, ouais. Apolline Gagné, ouais. Mylène Giffard, ok. Camille Hilaire, oui. Marina Michalalen, oui. Léa, je l'ai vu, je crois, oui. Marion Jacques, oui. Émilie Jaffeux, Émilie, oui. Vincent Janin, ok. Inès Cala, Lucie Klein, ouais. Anaïs Lapré, Oriane Leroy, Oriane, voilà. Donc, j'ai déjà vu dans le groupe. Margot Lullier, ouais. Manon Luc, Manon, oui. Cédric Lucky, ouais, il n'est pas là, bon. Alice Maillot, Estelle, je l'ai vu. Louise Masson, oui. Théo Michel Capucine, je l'ai vu. Morgane Penquin, Morgane, non. Paul Pichon, je viens de le voir. Fakri, elle est là. Héloïse Rémy. Héloïse, ouais. Pauline Richter, Thibaut Roth. Thibaut, une fois, deux fois, trois fois. Maxime Runinski, oui, je l'ai vu. Quentin Schultz, ouais. Nadège Seyer, Non, pas pour l'instant. Payam, je l'ai vu. Amanda Vilviel, ouais. Margot Viol, voilà. Est-ce qu'il y a des personnes que je n'ai pas appelées? Non, j'ai appelé tout le monde? C'est important, hein? Ouais? Bon, très bien. Donc même les Erasmus, a priori, sont inscrits maintenant. Parfait. Bien. Alors, on va continuer ce qu'on a commencé la semaine dernière. On s'en était arrêté sur la publicité, là, avec le petit garçon blanc et le petit garçon blanc, c'est ça. Alors, je me remets sur les documents parce qu'on va en avoir besoin. Peut-être fermer la porte parce que ça risque d'être bruyant dehors. Merci. Il fait chaud dans le salon. Non? Un peu quand même. Okay, so last time focusing on immigration and the way immigrants were perceived at home, that is in the mother country, mostly London in big cities, but also in the countryside for some of them. We first focused on two groups, Irish immigrants, Jewish immigrants, white immigration, as it was called at the time, and we saw that the perception of these immigrants was very different according to whether the Jewish community, as it was called, was concerned, or the Irish community. What were the differences in perception? And we analyzed, we compared two texts, one representing Jewish people, the other one speaking about Irish people, very characteristic of the way Irish and Jewish people were described generally. We also saw that as far as caricatures, cartoons were concerned, there were many more cartoons representing Irish people than cartoons representing Jewish people. Not that anti-Semitism did not exist at the time, of course it did exist, but it was expressed in a completely different way, and this notion of othering, the fact of representing someone as completely other than you, was especially applied to the Irish, much more than to the Jews. After comparing the way these two communities, I don't like the word community, in the sense that the impression is that every Irishman looks like another, which of course is not true. But this is the way they were called, the Jewish community, the Irish community. So after comparing these two communities, we passed on to the question of African people, black people, generally speaking, those who at the time were still called niggers or Negroes, and this was an absolutely normal term at the time, and until, I would say, the 1960s, these terms were very currently and commonly used in American or English language. So we passed on to the question of black people, and we saw that their perception, of course, was very much linked with the fact that many of them had been slaves until the first part of Victoria's reign. And we also saw that as this community, the black community, the Negro community as it was called at the time, was made of people who were colored people. This is what was called later colored immigration from the colonies initially, but also later from the new Commonwealth countries. As they were colored, the process of othering
was, of course, even more important in this case. And this is the first community, between inverted commas, that we'll focus on today. So, you remember that last time I saw you several extracts from text, but also several pictures showing how the scientific discourse of the time, or what was supposed to be the scientific discourse, stated that the evolution of man was a long one, and that the black man was a kind of a stage in the evolution of man. Same thing for the Irish man, but it was a kind of stage, an inferior stage in the evolution of mankind. And as this was presented as a scientific truth, and as this was written about again and again in newspapers, books, etc., people, of course, came to believe what was said and came to consider black people as inferior people, or Irish people as inferior people. So what is interesting when you study the Victorian period is to see how the racist discourse of today, which still exists today, and which has not completely disappeared today, even if, of course, many improvements have been made, was born during those times when a kind of a scale of human beings was imagined, and when it was said at the time that it was a scientific scale. Yes, so we started last time with, or from this very well-known picture or advert by Pear Soap, representing two boys, a black boy and a white boy. Where is it? Yeah, here. The black boy and the white boy. Don't know why. No. Well, yeah. The black boy and the white boy. And we saw that behind the apparently almost cute image, typically Victorian image, of two little boys playing together, the colonial discourse was very pleasant, was very present. It's obvious here that the colonial discourse can be found in the respective positions of the two children, with the white one standing, the black one sitting, and the white one obviously leading the black boy, advising the black boy, almost protecting the black boy in an almost paternalistic way, which was very much like the type of impression that the colonialists wanted to convey about their way of dealing with Africa or dealing with India. The fact that they were the fathers, the fact that they were the protectors. They tended to forget about all the episodes of violence, and they tried to show themselves as protectors, as benefactors. And you have exactly the same impression here. The little white boy is the benefactor, he is the protector. He is trying to educate, civilize, in a way, the little black boy. As at the time, civilization was very much associated with, and we have not studied the text yet, sorry. It was very much associated with whiteness, with light, in a way. And on the other hand, savagery was associated with darkness. Africa at the time was called the Dark Continent. And when the Victorians called Africa the Dark Continent, of course there was probably a reference to the color of African people's skin, the fact that their skin was dark, as opposed to the light complexion of the British, for instance. But at the same time, dark also meant savage. It also meant uncivilized. It also meant ignorance. darkness was ignorance. So there was very often in the texts of the time this dialectics of darkness and light, light being represented by the mother country, light being associated with civilization, and civilization being associated, of course, with Anglo-Saxon civilization, not other types of civilization, and on the other hand, darkness being associated with savagery, wildness. Wild was an adjective that was very much in use at the time to refer to black people, wild. And you find this here. The black boy, his clothes are also more or less, maybe not white, but at least not dark. And he represents civilization in the eyes of the Pear soap advertisers. He represents knowledge, he represents protection, he represents superiority, whereas the black boy, whose eyes you barely see, you see the caricature of the black man or woman here, a child, whose eyes you cannot see because he's so black. So it seems that everything is black in him, and that he can't even be recognized as an individual because of this. So this is very typical of the stereotypes of the time on black people. In the first picture, what is the black boy doing and what is the white boy basically doing? And even if you can't or you barely see his eyes, what seems to be the reaction of the black boy? Yeah.
The black boy is bathing and he...
Is bathing, yes.
It's like he's never do that before.
Yes, it's as if he had never seen a bath before, as if he had never been in water before. So he seems to be quite surprised. He's looking at this as if he was discovering what a bath was. Yes, so you see here the way the black boy is othered. He's represented as a kind of savage, a kind of wild child who has never seen water in his life, or at least who has never used water to bathe in his life. And of course, this implies what?
The white boy wants to clear his skin.
Yeah, to clean him. Yes, this implies that, one, the black boy is dirty, and this is an association which was very common at the time, the fact that black people were dirty, and that if you just scrubbed their skins, then they would become maybe not white, but at least they would have a lighter complexion. So the idea of dirt associated with black people. Yes, he seems to be surprised, as we said, and the white boy, who is the same age as the black boy, well, about the same age, seems much more mature. He's the adult, in a way. He's the adult in the way he seems to be advising the black boy, he seems to be guiding the black boy. And what is he doing exactly here? What is he doing here, and what is he doing here?
He tries to wash the skin of that black guy away.
Yes. So here he's trying to wash. He has a kind of sponge or something, and he's trying to scrub, probably more than wash, the skin of the little black boy, thinking that probably if he scrubs quite harshly enough, he will be able to lighten the skin of the black boy. Yes. And you see that, and this is symbolically very interesting, you see that he has put on an apron to protect him from, to protect himself from the dirt. It's not the water, probably, that he fears here. The water, well, doesn't stain clothes, but it's probably the dirt that will come off the skin of the black boy that he's afraid of. Hence, the apron here. So he's protecting himself, exactly as you remember what I said when we studied, I think, the picture in Slummy Bus. The the rich people put on their Macintoshes to be protected from the dirt they thought poor people conveyed. So it's exactly the same thing here. It's the kind of colonialist, here the white boy represents the colonialist, exactly as the rich people represented the colonialists in the colony of the poor neighbourhoods of London, and they protect themselves against the dirt, the supposed dirt, of course, that will come off the skin of the poor or the skin of black people.
Can we say it also has the notion of leadership and, you know, the teacher? Because
Of course.
when we look at the white person,
Yeah.
the right hand of that white guy is just like pointed
Like this,
that, like
pointed
Aristotle.
like that.
When you look at the pictures of
Absolutely.
Aristotle, he always is like that.
I absolutely agree. He is the teacher. He is the guide, as I was saying. Yes, and the black boy is just the one who has to listen. Yes, he's the pupil, he's the child. And this was a very common way of othering the colonized at the time, reducing them to the state of animals or reducing them to the state of children. We'll have a look at a Rudyard Kipling poem to express this very well. In the second part of the picture, you have a second scene, in a way, with the same characters, the same white boy, the same black boy. The white boy is still standing, the black boy, sorry, is still sitting, so you still have this opposition between the two. The white boy is still the guide, the teacher, the black boy is still the pupil, the inferior one in the presentation of the picture. What is the white boy doing this time? And here again he acts as a teacher. What does he have in his hands?
A mirror.
A mirror, yes, a mirror. So he wants to teach the black boy what it looks like to have used the soap. And the result is, well, he seems to be completely surprised and even afraid of the result, of course, because his identity seems to have completely changed. But the change, of course, is presented, the change which comes as a shock for the black boy, which is absolutely normal, as his skin is black and it shouldn't be white. So it comes as a shock to the black boy, but it seems to be perfectly normal and even a good thing for the white boy. He seems to be saying, look, now you've become a normal person. You are more civilized than before, because you look white, like me, right? This is the idea here. And of course, as the ad says, recommended for the complexion by Madame Adelina Pitti and Mrs. Langtry. They were two great actresses of the time, white actresses, obviously. As you have this remark, it shows that to the advertisers of their soap, and more generally speaking to British people, the fact that black boy should become white, at least partly, just his body, was something that was to be wished for, that was to be seen as positive. Whereas, of course, to the black boy, this comes as a shock, because it deprives him of his identity, obviously. So you may read behind this apparently cute and apparently completely inoffensive advert from the late 19th century or mid-19th century, you can read the story of colonialism, in a way, with white people imposing their own vision of civilization on other people, black people here, African people here, imposing their vision and considering that this imposition of their culture, of their civilization, of their vision of life, of their perception of life, is something for the good of the other people, right? So this is more or less the way the colonial process worked, and this is how very often black people were represented in adverts of the time or cartoons of the time, that is, as objects to be civilized, or as white things to be civilized. I'd like to show you a poem by Rudyard Kipling entitled The White Man's Burden. On l'a pas vu celui-là encore, hein? Je crois pas. The White Man's Burden. Je vous demande de temps en temps, parce que je fais un autre cours où en partie je reprends les mêmes textes et je ne sais plus dans quel cours je les fais après, donc pour ça je vous pose la question. So it's a text that, it's a poem which is very often quoted as representing the racism, the profound racism of Rudyard Kipling, even if his perception of all this was much more ambivalent than this. But in this text, obviously, you can see Kipling the imperialist, and you can see the imperialist point of view that he had on all this. When he speaks of the white man's burden, of course, he considers that the white man's burden is the black man. And when at the time you said Negro or black, you considered all those whose skin was not white. That is, Indian people were called black people, or Negroes sometimes. So it doesn't mean when they say black or Negro, it doesn't mean that they meant people coming from Africa, Jamaica, etc. It meant everybody that did not look like let's say, the true-born Englishman, you know, of the poem by Daniel Defoe. Well, it's not an easy poem to read, but still there are passages I'd like to focus on. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best you breed, go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and white, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. Well, already here, look at the vocabulary used to refer to African or Indian people. You first have, well, they are the captives, of course. The captives are those that the colonialists have invaded, in a way. They are their captives. And they are referred to as wild, fluttered and wild, sullen, half devil, half child. And here you have everything that participated in the othering process, and that explains that in the public sphere, when in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool, black people started to be more and more visible, or Indian people started to be more and more visible, they were very often associated with either wild people, that is, uncivilized people. Uncivilized in the colonialists' mind, meaning not adhering to the Anglo-Saxon civilization, because, of course, African people had a civilization which sometimes was probably even older than the Anglo-Saxon civilization, but they considered that this was not a civilization, not in the sense that they imagined civilization should be. So, this notion of wideness, sullen, what does it imply, sullen people? How do you... Well, here it would be the opposite of bright, the opposite of clever, you know. It's more or less, it points to this idea of ignorance. Ignorance, why? Well, simply because when they arrived in Africa, they realized, of course, that the African civilization was completely different from the Anglo-Saxon civilization, And from an industrial and economic point of view, it was not as developed as the European civilization, which didn't mean, of course, that African people were ignorant. They simply had another kind of knowledge. But as this knowledge was almost mysterious to Europeans, they considered that they were ignorant, that they were savages with absolutely no education, except that they just had another type of education, another type of civilization. And of course you have the half devil and half child, and this is very characteristic also, for instance, of the cartoons representing our people. They are really half devil, half child on the cartoons. Half ape, I would say, and half child, maybe more than half devil and half child. But the reference to an ape or the reference to the devil is almost the same thing in this respect, if you want. So reducing black people to the state of children, as if their intelligence had been arrested, as if they were not more intelligent than a newborn baby, in a way, or even than an embryo, as we saw in another text last time. And the black man is presented as the white man's burden, and throughout the poem, Kipling is going to represent the colonizing process as a kind of sacrifice on the part of white people. A kind of sacrifice, that is, they are taking up the black man, who becomes a burden, and who is not even grateful for what white people are doing. This is the main meaning of the poem. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride, by open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. So, what does this imply? By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain. What does it imply about African people? If the white men have to repeat 100 times the same thing in open speech and simple, what does it imply?
To imply they are stupid.
That they are stupid. Yeah, this is what is implied, that they are stupid. Well, of course they could not understand what the colons said. They didn't speak the same language. So obviously, it was impossible for them to understand. And it was absolutely normal that they should need people to repeat several times the same thing, as they didn't speak the same language. But you see the point of view of the colonialist here, the imperial writer that Rudyard Kipling was. He considered that it was absolutely normal that these African people should be able to speak English fluently. Because England, or the United Kingdom, more generally speaking, was supposed to be the cradle of civilization. This is at least what they thought. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace, fill full the mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your gold is nearest the end for others sought, what sloth and heathen folly bring all your hope to naught. So this idea that...
Laziness?
Yes, that black people are lazy. This was one of the many stereotypes about black people, that they are lazy, and that as they are lazy, even if the white imperialists do their best to improve their way of life, well, the result will end in heaven folly and bring all the hopes of white people to naught. That is, what they have done is simply done in vain, because the black people, according to Kipling, are so lazy that they will not be able to profit, in fact, from the improvements given by the white people. So you see why Rudyard Kipling was called an imperialist. His poem is particularly violent in this respect, and it shows very well how many people regarded black people at the time as a burden. But a burden that had to be dealt with because it was like a mission for the white colonizer to deal with this problem, you see. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward, the blame of those you better, the hate of those you guard, the cry of hosts you humour are slowly towards the light. Why brought you us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? And this is the reaction, well, the so-called reaction of black people. White people are presented as trying to take black people out of their bondage, out of their slavery, well, which is quite ironical, by the way, and to guide them towards the light being the opposite of darkness, that is, the light representing knowledge, the opposite of ignorance, the light representing civilization, the opposite of wilderness, and then they can hear the reproach coming from those they have colonized and saying, why brought you us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? So you see, black people associated with the night, white people associated with the light, and as a kind of reproach, black people wanting to remain what they were before, which is absolutely normal in itself. But Rudyard Kipling insists on the fact that the white people sacrificed themselves for the black people, and that in return what they get is reproaches. Yes, and then, well, you have the last stanza, which I won't read. So you have here a particularly telling example, which echoes in a way what we've seen here. That is this opposition that the Victorians made between blacks and whites, between darkness and light, between wilderness and civilization, and the role that they thought they had as leading a kind of civilizing mission. And what the white boy symbolically is doing here is that he's leading his own civilizing mission, at his own level with this little black boy, maybe one of his neighbors, or probably working for him, or son of someone working for his parents. And it's his own civilizing mission that is trying to make him a civilized being in the meaning that the Victorians intended at the time. You also have this picture, which is also a Pear Soap ad, and which is interesting because it's a Pear Soap ad like the one with the two little boys, but it's also entitled The White Man's Burden. So it's a picture, it's an advert for Pear Soap, which took up the poem by Rudyard Kipling and mixed the Pear Soap advert with Rudyard Kipling's poem to convey exactly the same type of message. Well, look at the pictures first. Well, you have a central picture in this kind of oval, which we'll analyze first, and then you have background pictures, which we'll analyze later. So what can we see in the oval picture? Who does this man represent, according to you?
A military guy that is washing his hands from dirt.
Yes. So he works for the military, obviously. Well, would you say a lower rank or higher rank? Higher, obviously, probably colonel or something like that. So he's typically the English gentleman of the time, the English military of the time, an officer, high rank officer, obviously. Where is he?
The bathroom?
It's a bathroom, yes. Seems to be a bathroom. Well, this looks like...
It's not like it's in a ship.
Yeah, this looks like a window in a ship. So maybe a ship. Well, we don't know exactly, but it could be a ship, a bathroom in a ship. And he's washing his hands, which seem to be dirty, and he's washing his hands with Pear's soap. So that's what we can see. Immediately we associate this man with the colonialist, obviously. He is one of the colonizers. Then in the background we have the four corners of the pictures, which are illustrated with what can we see in the left-hand side and, well, top left-hand side and right-hand side corners. What are they? Here and here. Ships, yes, ships, which reinforces the idea that this man may be in a ship himself. So ships at sea, probably referring to the colonies and the way they went to the colonies. And these two pictures at the top of the central oval picture, are more interesting in themselves. On the one hand, what can you see here?
A cargo?
Yeah, it's a ship, and they are
Importing and exporting.
Yes, there are people obviously carrying. What is this? This is cargo, but what is this? It's Pear's soap boxes. It's Pear's. It's written Pear's. So it's Pear's soap boxes. So bars of soaps in big boxes, big crates, and they are carried out of or carried off the boats. So this implies exportations or exports of soap, of Pear's soap, and the exportation of Pear's soap probably into a foreign country. We can see this when we look at the people here. This exportation of soap refers to
Exportation of knowledge and civilization.
absolutely to the exportation of knowledge, to the exportation of civilization in an otherwise wild country, or rather supposedly wild country. So the crate here represents civilization, they represent knowledge, they represent light. Here you have another interesting picture with a crate of Pear's soap on the ground. And look at these two men and try to tell me who they represent. The man standing represents
The colonizer.
the colonizer, he's the white man. The way he's dressed, he's probably a missionary. You know, there were religious missionaries sent to Africa or to other countries. He's typically the missionary. He's not a military, at least. He's not a military. He's typically a missionary. He's standing, showing his so-called superiority. And you have this man here. What can you say about this man?
He's the one in the right is like the God, and the one in the left is like worshipping the...
Yes, absolutely. He seems to be worshipping this missionary. He seems to be worshipping him as if he was a god, as if he were the god, and as if he was just the worshipper. Very tellingly, he is almost naked to stress his wideness, as was thought at the time. He's almost naked. Well, he's dressed as people were dressed in these parts of the world, of course. And the way he is, you see, this one is crouching, he's erect. This one is, how would you describe his position on the ground? Almost.
Inferior.
Yes, the notion of inferiority is obviously conveyed here, but he's almost
As you
crouching.
said, is a notion of embarrow. It looks like an barrel. It's just bunched together.
Yes, he's almost crouching on the ground, and he seems to be praying his God, the God being the missionary. So you see the imperial message behind it all. And of course, why is he praying this God, so-called God? Because the God is bringing soap to him. As if giving a bar of soap to a savage, as they were called at the time, was in a way allowing him to go towards the light and to reach a state of civilization. Now look at the text. The text is completely in keeping with the rest of the pictures and the analysis we've just made of the pictures. The first step towards lightening the white man's burden is through teaching the virtues of cleanliness. The first step towards lightening the white man's burden is through teaching the virtues of cleanliness. So very often at the time, this notion of cleanliness was associated with the colonizing process. The colonizing process was seen as a way to clean the world. And the first step towards lightening the white man's burden, c'est-à-dire la première chose à faire pour alléger, c'est lightening dans le sens d'alléger, le fardeau de l'homme blanc, c'est d'apprendre les vertus de la propreté. Of course, it's Pear Soap advertisers speaking. So their point of view is to insist on this notion of cleanliness. But this was a very common image at the time. Pear soap is a potent factor in brightening the dark corners of the earth as civilization advances, while amongst the culture of all nations, it holds its highest place. It is the ideal toilet soap. All sorts of people use it, all sorts of stores sell it. So you see the notion of brightening the dark corners of the earth, brightening in the sense of bringing people to knowledge, bringing people to education, bringing people to civilization, but a civilization which does not correspond to their own civilization, that is imposing their civilization, and the opposition between the cultured and the dark corners of the world. The cultured represent Europe, represents the Western world, while the dark corners of the earth represent Africa, Asia, South Asia, etc. So you find almost exactly the same type of meaning, the same type of implication in a picture like this one, who seems to be innocuous, apparently on the face of it, who seems to be a cute Victorian advert, and this picture, which looks completely different, which plays on the notion of the civilizing mission, but in fact the notion of the civilizing mission is also very present in this picture. When we saw last time different representations of the Irish, I don't know why I've included this one. It's an error. It's 1957. So don't pay attention to this one. Well, it's a way to see that in 1957 not many things had changed, but it's not part of the program, obviously. Well, the way the women were seen is also interesting in the 1957 advert, but it's not part of the program, of course. Yes, so last time we had a look at different pictures representing Irish people, you remember? I'd like to have a look at this one. No, this is the Irish. This is the Irish. Well, they loved representing Irish people. Well, this is a Jewish man. We have not had a look at it. Generally, the only types of caricatures about Jewish people was the link they had with money, which is still a stereotype that is going on today, by the way. You see, the Jewish man as a usurer, un usurier. The Jewish man, here's the man in his fagin in Oliver Twist here. And he's manipulating the boy here, Oliver Twist. And you see money lent upon every description of valuable property, so he is typically a usurer. So this was the type of caricature that you had of Jewish people. But it didn't go beyond that most of the time. And you see that even if it is obviously a way of othering Jewish people, it is much less violent, I would say, than the representation of Irish people as monkeys, apes, and the representation of black people as half children, half devil. This is another representation of the time, well, 1906, so the Edwardian period this time. What do you think of the way the black people are represented here?
They become a little bit civilized because they wore clothes before they were naked.
Yes, that's true. So on the one hand, the picture seems to be aiming at showing that thanks to the British, the savages have been more or less civilized. They are wearing clothes, almost all of them, maybe with the exception of this child. What kind of clothes are they wearing, by the way, if you look at this man? Or are they typically African clothes? Obviously not. So what is the impression given here? That they look?
They look like clowns.
Yes, they look like clowns. They look disguised, in fact. They look like clowns. And this was very often a way of presenting black people as if this civilizing process that had been applied to them, that had been imposed upon them, helped them to look like white people, but not entirely. Hence the clown effect, I would say. Yes, they are wearing civilized clothes. Once again, when I'm using civilized, of course, I'm using it in inverted commas, in quotes. This is the way people thought at the time. But they still don't look like the true-born Englishmen, right? Yes, they are smoking as British people would smoke, and yet they look like clowns. It seems they are disguised in a way. They are disguised as white people, as civilized people. This is the impression. And of course, their features are completely exaggerated. What does the cartoonist insist on, which makes them look like clowns, as you've said? Their mouth. It seems that their mouth is white, you know, that it's the only thing you can see in their faces, exactly as with a clown who makes up his mouth. The eyes, very big eyes, it seems, each time, or almost each time. So the faces are obviously distorted, and they are distorted to better show the difference between them and white people. It's typically a way of putting to the fore, in a very paternalistic way. If you look at the legend, the caption, it says, a representative of the Mbomsati government, is at present in London studying the methods of the Metropolitan Police with the object of adapting some of them to the local needs of the Protectorate. So the Protectorate means that the British are still in their country. And in a way, these black people are shown as imitators. They can just imitate white people. They can just imitate their civilization. They can just imitate their police. They can just imitate the way they're dressed. They can just imitate the way they smoke, etc., etc. Always this idea of considering them as inferior, as only able to imitate. Okay? And the whole picture is very characteristic in the sense that, well, they try to imitate white people through their costumes, dresses. They try to imitate the metropolitan police, except, of course, that they have to adapt what the metropolitan police does. So instead of horses, for instance, they use camels, they use giraffes, etc., etc., which becomes a little ridiculous here. And everything in the background reminds us that their country is very different. There is the serpent, for instance, here. There is the parrot in the middle of the street. Instead of cats and dogs, you have a parrot. You have a kind of iguana, or I don't know what it is. The houses, of course, don't look like the houses in Britain. The animals, instead of dogs and cats, are iguanas, giraffes, a camel, a parrot, a butterfly, a hippo, or rhino, I never know, etc., etc. So at the same time, partly similar, but not exactly similar. Exactly as the little black boy in the pear soap picture was partly similar after he was cleaned with pear soap, but not entirely. His head remained black, as if to show that there would always be a difference between black and white people. So this picture is very telling. It's already the Edwardian period, but the stereotypes are obviously exactly the same. So this one we've seen. This one is again Oliver Twist, well, with a Jewish man in prison. Here, another one, typical, same as with the pear soap ad. This time two girls, apparently. One is white, the other is black. No, he's a boy, sorry. You dirty boy, why don't you wash yourself with Finolia soap? So exactly the same idea, exactly the same message. This one dates back to 1895. So that you see, when many adverts like these were published and could be seen in the streets, well, it was almost normal for people to believe that black people were dirty, of course. And you see again the white girl, the protector, offering the bar of soap in a very paternalistic way, or maternalistic way, maybe here. And the black boy, and I think the fact that the black boy should be wearing a kind of dress is also interesting in itself, because, well, probably a white boy would not have worn this type of dress, and it's a way also of showing that with the other, the black boy here, everything is uncertain, even gender is uncertain. There were very often anxieties about gender as well, when Victorian people dealt with nationalities with different skin colors. The notion of gender was also associated, and the blurring of genders in a way. And I guess that this may be implied here. I may be wrong, but this is a possibility. This one, W.M.H. West's Big Minstrel Jubilee. It's an ad dating back to the early 20th century. Billy Van, the monologue comedian. And obviously, these two pictures represent...
I think in that time when the actors tried to play black roles, they never hired the real black ones. So
yes.
The white ones, they colored them something black.
Absolutely. So his face was, here's the same, obviously. It's called the monologue comedian, so he is on his own on stage. And well, this is the comedian here, and this is the same comedian, except that his face has been made up with what?
Coal? Coal?
Maybe coal or
Wax? Wax?
yeah, it may be wax. Or what you take to make your shoe shine. Yeah, shoe shine. Or shoe shine, black shoe shine. Black shoe shine, very often it was black shoe shine. And you see again the focus on the lips and the focus on the eyes. They look, I don't know if you have the same impression, but they look bigger in the black version, as well as the lips look bigger, to accentuate the stereotype that white people had of black people at the time. Yes, at the time, very often when you had to play a black actor, it was a white comedian playing the black actor. Why, according to you?
Because they thought they are inferior, and then that's why they never employed them. So
No, because, well, little by little we'll see that more and more black people would become famous in musicals, etc., etc. But initially it was simply because they didn't want a black man, a real black man, to kiss, for instance, a white woman. When, for instance, they played Othello, Othello, who is a black man in Shakespeare's play, was very seldom played by a black man, but it was played by a white man disguising as a black man, because in the scenes where he kisses Ophelia, for instance, a white woman, a white actress, they didn't want, it was something considered impure to see a black man kissing a white woman. Well, it doesn't mean that there were no mixed marriages at the time. There were mixed marriages at the time. But you know that at the time, if you married, if a British woman, a white British woman, married a black man, she lost her nationality. And this was true until, I can't remember the exact date, but this was true for quite a long time. It was not true the other way around, of course. When when a white man married a black woman, he didn't lose his nationality, of course. Oh, that's the difference between men and women. Look at this one, 1890. Oh, sleep, it is a gentle thing, beloved from pole to pole. The best nightcap. Have your sheets and bed linen washed regularly with Hudson's extract of soap. Hudson's dry soap, and they will always be sweet, fresh as sea breezes. There will be none of the disagreeable smell so objectionable in some soaps. What do you think of this picture? It looks cute.
it's for prison that white color gives them comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the three babies, cute little babies, they are in an entirely white bed, and they seem to be protected by the white bed and the white sheets around them, yes. So they seem to be provided with comfort, I agree with you. What else can you say? Especially when you read the, have your sheets and bed linen washed regularly with Hudson's extract of soap. And there will be, and then it says, the text reads, and there will be always sweet, fresh as sea breezes. There will be none of the disagreeable smell so objectionable in some soaps. Given the other adverts that you've read about soap and black people, what may be implied?
With the soap, gives you the opportunity without the smells, dirt. You don't smell anymore.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm not sure about the smell, because they speak of the smell of the soap, but I'm almost sure that it means that even if the babies stain the sheets because of their black skin, then the soap will be able to wash it all, you see, to wash off the stains. I'm almost sure that this is what was intended here. The fact that the babies, well, they may look cute, but they are still black, so at the time, they thought that it meant dirt. So I'm almost sure that here, have your sheets and then linen washed regularly with Hudson's extract of soap, or Hudson's dry soap, etc. I'm almost sure that it implies this. And this is why they used black children. It's not as openly racist, obviously, as the Pear soap one, which is openly racist, but given the context, given the other ads on soaps at the time, I'm pretty sure that this is the message hidden behind it. So that the cute aspect of the picture hides something much less cute. This is another one. This one is for biscuits. So this one is for biscuits. Or maybe you can't see it very clearly. Where does the scene take place, apparently? Well, it's no longer... So it's Huntly and Palmer's manufacturers to the Queen. Well, no, it's not Africa, this one. We'll have a look at it later. So, yeah, it was this one. So this one. This time it's not for... Look at this one. Still looks very cute. What can we see? A stereotype of, you know, the big mama, the African woman. Well, apparently it was published in, I think this one looks more American than British, but it was published in a UK magazine all the same. So it's for Lux. Lux is what is it apparently? Sorry, shampoo? No, I'm not sure. It's probably to wash linen. So it's not a shampoo. It's to wash linen. But what is the African woman doing? She's washing a little boy, a black boy, and look at the caption: "Won't shrink wool." Won't shrink wool. Why do they say won't shrink wool? Donc il dit simplement que cette lessive, parce qu'une lessive ça a l'air d'être liquide, mais enfin, ça existait peut-être déjà la lessive liquide à l'époque, ça ne va pas faire rétrécir la laine. Pour une lessive, c'est bien. Of course, because they associate wool with the hair of African people. It was one of the stereotypes of the time, the fact that they had woolly hair. So you see here, his woolly hair, as it was called at the time, is all white because of the washing, well, liquid or powder or whatever. And it won't shrink wool is a funny way, they thought, of saying that this washing powder, Lux, was a good washing powder because it won't shrink your wool, so you can safely wash your pullovers, sweaters, etc. with this washing powder, except, of course, that there was this stereotype, first of the big mama, and second of the so-called woolly hair of African people, African children. So again, this is why I'm pretty sure that this picture is not innocent. Because almost all adverts of the time, none of them were innocent in this respect. Yes. Okay. So, yeah. Oui. En général, quand il y a une image, l'associer à un texte. Très souvent, on va vous donner deux extraits. Donc, il va y avoir un extrait qui va être une image et un extrait, un texte, ou alors deux extraits plus courts. Oui, sans problème. Very right. So you see that the perception of black people in the public sphere became more and more visible, especially as they were more and more used in advertising campaigns like these ones. And for most people, it was the only way they had to meet the other, to meet African people. Of course, when they lived in London, they had the opportunity to meet African people, at least in some neighborhoods. But generally speaking, they were slowly becoming visible in the public sphere, and they probably were even more visible through these advertising campaigns. So that, exactly as we said last time, the Victorian people fantasized about the other. They fantasized about the Irish immigrants. They fantasized about black people. They imagined all types of stories that they had heard about, or that they had read in the newspapers, or that they had read in books, or that they saw on adverts, and they constructed their image, their perception of immigrants, their perception of Irish people, their perception of black people. They constructed their own perception on the basis of these false representations. So that the meeting between the other was very often based on misperceptions, misconceptions on the other from what they had read before, from what they had seen before. In the 19th century, there was an increasing number of black musicians, but very often street musicians. They lived in the streets. I'd like you to take the text, which is, I think I have included it, I hope so. Where is it? Yeah. I'd like you to take the text from the sketch written on the 24th of April 1895, entitled 9 Little Nigger Boys. Can you see this one? 9 Little Nigger Boys. Well, I would like you to take, well, it's not a long text, you see, it's mostly pictures. But I would like you to analyze these pictures and to read the text that goes with the picture, and then we'll discuss what you have analyzed. Okay? So the sketch 9 Little Nigger Boys, it's in the document for week 3 to 6. Do you have the text? Yeah? So, take 5-10 minutes to read the text, and then we'll discuss during prayer. So let's maybe first discuss the pictures. Are they cartoons or pictures this time? They are pictures, they are photographs, yes, they are black and white photographs. What's the difference between, what's the basic difference in the impression conveyed between these four pictures and the cartoons representing black people that we've analyzed so far? Yes, here they appear, even if, of course, the pictures are obviously staged. They are not taken, well, they are not spontaneously standing in front of the camera. They are posing, obviously. But here they appear as they are, obviously, at least their features, and they appear as absolutely normal people, yes. You do not see the exaggerated mouth or the exaggerated bulging eyes, the exaggerated woolly hair, as was supposed to be the characteristic of black people at the time, characteristics that were exaggerated through cartoons to better stress the difference, the so-called difference between blacks and whites. So here they appear as absolutely absolutely normally. Their skin is dark, of course, so they are different from the spectators or the readers of this magazine from this point of view, but otherwise they are not exaggerated in the way they were exaggerated, caricatured in the pictures. That's right. Yet, of course, the whole is staged. The whole is staged. They have been asked to pose for the picture. And the very fact of asking them to pose for the picture, of course, may have been to give a certain image of them. How do you react to these pictures? Do you feel there is a bias in the way they are represented in the picture or not? What do you think? What would you say? What do you feel? What do they seem to be doing? Enjoying themselves. Enjoying themselves. They seem to be glad to be together and joking together. Obviously, here they are joking together. Well, the bias is obviously much less obvious than in the caricatures we've seen, than in the cartoons we've seen. Well, maybe you would say that this one with the way his hair is dressed and the way he seems to be like a scarecrow in the background, but it's just joking. So it's difficult to say that it is on the part of the photographer a bias, a way of showing black people as white people, for instance. It's just people joking together, I would say. So in the pictures themselves, I don't think that the bias is particularly present. The pictures represent people enjoying themselves, joking at one another, posing for the camera very proudly, and here looking at something. What are they looking at, according to you?
Television?
A television in 1895. No, but that's exactly what I thought, but it can't be a television.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is.
Picture frame?
It's a frame, maybe, simply, yes, a framed picture. Or maybe it's a picture of themselves, and they're looking at the picture of themselves, and they seem to be surprised because, well, the photograph was a new technology at the time, so they are discovering this new technology. It's typically the gaze that people had at the time when they went to the music halls or to the fun fairs, and they could see films that had been filmed in the afternoon and that represented themselves. They discovered their image on the screen. So it's not here particularly to say, well, these are inferior people, they don't know what it is to be photographed. No, everybody acted like this at the time because it was a new technology and you discovered the technology. So I think this is exactly what is taking place here. So the pictures are quite neutral, I would say. Are quite neutral, at least. They have been staged, obviously, but they are quite neutral as far as race prejudice is concerned. The text, on the other hand, is not neutral at all, right? So we're going to focus now on the text, and I would like you to analyze the type of bias that is included in the text. Sorry. And these tuneful nine, so the tuneful nine are 9 black boys here. Real Kentucky pickaninnies are now appearing at the Empire. The Empire was a music hall. Their cotton field ditties, meet and house hymns, I think they are hymns because there is a good deal about the Golden Shore, and breakdowns make a very pleasing interlude. True, the singing is not extravagantly melodious, for some of the voices are in that unhappy stage when a thrillingly high G tumbles down like a house of cards into a bovine diapason. Indeed, in the unaccompanied catches, the effect is more than startling. Still, it's interesting when you catch the spirit of it, but the dancing is the chief delight. It is such a magnificent mélange of old crude African war dances, Irish jigs, Highland flings, and Spanish bolero. The American nigger is a thorough-paced eclectic in his dancing, but in one thing he is pure and patriotic. One thing is his own, and it is a joy forever, the peacocking walk round. It is impossible to describe, it must be seen. the conceit, the pride, the dignity are inimitable, colossal. I have never seen a cakewalk, but, but I should imagine it to be something like what our Kentucky visitors are giving us at the Empire, and the 9 grin as one man. And now let me speak of the Piccadilly piccaninnies. I mean the Moor and Burgess minstrels who are once more playing in crowded houses in the St. James's Hall. I looked in for an hour on one of the afternoons in Easter week and found an excellent program in full swing. The songs by the minstrels are by turns amusing and pathetic. And the miscellaneous items are well chosen and varied. Some of the exploits of 3 knockabouts were very clever, though it is to be hoped that they will not receive the flattery of imitation from the youngsters who formed a large part of the audience. Otherwise, the family doctor will be in speedy requisition. The Black Constabulary is funny, although the interior of a police station has often been more accurately delineated. I fancy the female impersonations fell rather flat, partly because the people who attend Moor and Burgess do not, as a rule, see Madame Bernhardt, and therefore could not appreciate the subtle humour of a burlesque of her. So what do you think of the text? Mostly, is it positive or negative? Positive, yes, it's mostly positive. He said that it was a delight to watch the spectacle. Well, of course, he reproaches them with a few weaknesses, especially as far as their imitation of Sarah Bernhardt went, the great actress. But all in all, the message is quite positive. And yet, something which is not present in the pictures, you still feel the bias towards black people present in the way the journalist writes his article. Where exactly? It's not, of course, as openly racist as in the Pear Soap ads. I agree with this. But still, there are some words, some expressions which are very telling. Yeah. Yes, of course. But this they could have said about a lower class musical as well. So it's not particularly targeted at black people. It's just the way they play, which is a little bovine, according to. So I don't think this is linked with a racial prejudice here. But still, it is negative, obviously. No, there's an expression which is very stereotypical to refer to black people in the United States.
The nigger?
Well, nigger, of course. More, but another one. And I'm not even sure what it means initially. It's piccaninnies. Piccaninnies, c'était la façon dont on appelait les esclaves, etc. Et je ne sais, piccaninnies, comme ça. Et je ne sais pas quelle est la, je regarde, quelle est la, l'origine du mot. En tout cas, c'est pas une façon gentille. Hein, c'est vraiment une insulte, piccaninny. Alors. Bon, on va prendre Wikipédia, faute de mieux. Qu'est-ce qu'ils disent? Piccaninny? No. North American usage, a racial slur which refers to a depiction of dark-skinned child. Oui, c'est ça, c'est pour les enfants d'origine africaine. Alors, ça vient du portugais pequenino. Oui, c'est le petit, en fait, le petit. D'accord. Mais il y a des connotations très racistes derrière. Hein. Piccaninny, c'est pas... N'utilisez pas le mot piccaninny si vous voulez parler à un petit enfant noir. C'est vraiment très chargé comme piccaninnies. Piccaninny, it implied all the stereotypes about black children. And one of them is included here. It's the notion that they are constantly grinning. Le sourire. hein, le sourire, comme s'ils avaient toujours un sourire béat, des cheveux en laine, et puis etc. Donc le Pickaninny, et là il le dit, il dit à un moment donné, they grin, all the 9 grin as one man. Ça va entièrement avec la notion de Pickaninny. Il n'y a rien de mal en soi de dire que ces 9 jeunes sourient, pas du tout. En soi, il n'y a rien de mal de dire qu'ils sourient, donc ils sourient. Mais c'est l'association comme si tous les enfants noirs souriaient toujours bêtement et n'étaient pas capables de quelque chose. Très souvent, on voyait des textes de l'époque qui disaient « Oh, bah, vous pouvez leur faire n'importe quoi, ils feront quand même leur sourire, voilà quoi, hein, ils bougeront pas. » Donc ça les réduit, ça les essentialise, hein, ça fait comme si tous étaient pareils, que tous souriaient tout le temps, que tous avaient des cheveux en laine, woolly, que tous, etc., avaient de grosses lèvres, avaient de... Voilà. So, you see, here you have something completely different, apparently positive, praising the spectacle that these 9 black boys are offering to the London public. They come from America and from the United States probably, and they offer the spectacle to the public. But at the same time, not in the pictures maybe, but certainly in the text, you have the usual bias about African children, at least, the Pickaninnies, always grinning. And on the other hand, when you read the whole article, you also have the impression that the people who go to watch the show don't only go for the songs themselves, but also for the spectacle that these black boys represent in a country in which black people were still quite invisible. It's only after the Second World War that black people started to be more and more visible in the public sphere, right? So it was still almost an exception, almost an event to see 9 white boys coming from the United States and singing in a musical at the time. And there is this impression of the black people as a kind of spectacle, exactly as the poor people were seen as a kind of spectacle, as we've already seen. So this notion of the other is not only, does not only have a race dimension, it also has a social dimension. We'll have exactly the same description of the poor. Here it is black people, last time it was Irish people, but we'll have exactly the same thing when we study the new visibility of the poor in the public sphere. Right, now a few words about the last category of immigrants I wanted to focus on as part of this course, Asian immigrants. Especially Chinese immigrants and South Asian immigrants. Well, maybe we'll start with the Chinese population. The Chinese population, well, I have included one picture of one representation of a Chinese man, as represented at the time. It's the first caricature I included, it's this one, yes, this one. It's so typically the way Chinese people were seen at the time. Well, the caricature, the cartoon is entitled John Chinaman Weeping Over His Tail. John Chinaman Weeping Over His Tail. And you have his pigtail here, you know, he was wearing a pigtail, as almost all Chinese people did at the time, which is not something exaggerated. This was the way they looked at the time. What can you say about this first, in the right-hand side of the picture? So it's the pigtail, and it seems to be presented as what? Where does he seem to be here? In a museum, absolutely. It seems to be a kind of exhibit in a museum, and an exhibit which is so precious to him that it is, you know, in a kind of, well, I don't know what to call this, either in French or in English, but a kind of glass structure which protects the tail. And it seems that the tail is shown to the public, except that the only public is the Chinese man himself, as if to imply that this exhibit is only of interest to him. So he's first ridiculed through his attitude towards this pigtail, the way it is enshrined, it seems. C'est comme une sorte de relique. It's a kind of relic. It is enshrined in this glass structure, and you see it is on a kind of pedestal, as if to show its importance, an almost religious importance to him. And of course, the reader is supposed not to understand why this pigtail should be protected by this glass structure and put on a pedestal in a museum, because it's something completely foreign to the British reader or to the British viewer. This kind of religious attachment, this kind of religious rapport with the pigtail. And you see that on the pedestal you have Chinese characters, I would say, Chinese letters or words. Right, what about the man himself? What can you say about the way he's depicted, the way he's caricatured, the way he is othered, once again, by the cartoonist? And what are the comparison we may draw with the representation of Irish people or black people, which we don't find in the representations of Jewish people, as I've said.
Kind of look like a giant monster.
Yes. Well, first he's very big, yeah. It looks like an ogre, monster, maybe not a monster, but it's massive, really.
Drunk. Because
I'm not sure he's drunk, no.
Because there's that thing next to his waist.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's alcohol. I don't think so. Chinese people were not associated with alcohol. They were associated with opium, obviously, but not alcohol. I'm not sure. I think this is part of his maybe a belt or something. I don't know what. What about the expression on his face? He looks
Crying or frowning.
yes, obviously frowning, maybe crying. We don't know. He has a kind of handkerchief, or so maybe he's crying. He seems at the same time angry, sad. Frowning, crying. Anything else?
The tail seems to be his own.
Of course, the tail is his own tail, you see. His hair has been cut off here. So he's deprived in a way of a part of his identity, which is a shock to him, which is absolutely normal. But the cartoon makes fun of him as if it was ridiculous to cry over a pigtail, you see. So there's the contrast between the shock that this man has had by having his pigtail, a symbol of his own identity, just cut off like this, and almost the respect, the religious respect he has for this part of himself on a pedestal in the glass structure, and the fact that the cartoonist makes fun at him, a man crying in front of a pigtail. This looks ridiculous, especially when you know that men at the time were supposed to be strong, were supposed to represent, a rock who is never going to cry, especially over a pigtail. And in his attitude, you see, he seems to be going like this. He seems to be like a child, a capricious child, exactly as black people, Irish people were considered to be capricious children. So you have the same reduction of the Chinese man to the state of a child, an ignorant child. someone inferior because he is ignorant, and because his civilization is supposed to be inferior, is supposed to be strange, is supposed to be alien. The pigtail represents the alienness of this civilization. Yes, what is also interesting is the title that the cartoonist gave to the picture. John Chinaman weeping over his tail. John Chinaman. What do you think of the name given to this character, John Chinaman?
Very motivating.
He has a very English first name, first. He has a very English first name, as if he had been assimilated in a way in the British identity, and yet, is not entirely British, as his last name is Chinaman. And in Chinaman, what is interesting is that any Chinese man could be called a Chinaman. So it means that he completely loses, he doubly loses his identity in a way. He loses his identity because his first name has been anglicized, John, the typically common name. John means anybody. And he also loses his identity, he's alienated from his identity because he's just called by a word referring to the category he belongs to, the national category, Chinaman. As if all British people were called John British, you see? So, and of course he's being alienated because he lost a part of his identity with the tail being cut off. So again, exactly as in the picture with the African people trying to imitate the metropolitan police in their own country, again we have the British civilization which tries to impose itself on a foreign man, John Chinaman. The man loses his identity, and he's in a kind of intermediary state. He's no longer entirely Chinese. His pigtail has been cut off. He's now named John. So he has lost his Chinese identity, at least partly, but he's not completely British either. He obviously does not fit in the British landscape. He's wearing Chinese clothes. There is an insistence on his eyes, you know. Another example I could show you is maybe you know these films, the Fu Manchu films, no? Fu Manchu. Yeah, it's this one. Sont des... Oh, ça c'est pas la version, non, ça c'est la version, je veux pas celle-là, ça m'intéresse pas, je veux la vieille version. Au départ, c'est vraiment des histoires qui ont été écrites à l'époque. Hein. Fu Manchu, c'était, je sais plus avec qui, attends, je vais essayer de retrouver avec qui c'était. C'est de Sax Rohmer, oui, c'est en 1900 et quelques, mais au cinéma, voilà, dans les années 20, ouais, c'est celui-là, je pense. Ça doit être celui-là, Mysterious Fu Manchu. Ça doit être ça. Non, c'était l'autre. Donc ça, typique aussi. Bon, il n'y a pas le son, mais c'est pas grave. De toute façon, ça devait être muet, donc... Je sais pas quand il apparaît, hein, mais... Voilà. Mais moi, je veux Fu Manchu, sinon c'est pas drôle.
C'est pas la bonne scène. C'est une image que je veux retrouver avant tout. Bon, c'est celui-là, entre autres, mais il y en a d'autres qui sont plus significatives encore. En gros, c'est celle-ci, hein, c'est... je ne sais pas si c'est les premiers, ceux-là. Donc, vous voyez, c'est toujours l'idée du chinois mystérieux qui cache quelque chose. Inscrutable Chinese. Alors, l'Africain, celui qui sourit toujours, d'un air bête, et puis le Chinois, c'est celui qui a l'air mystérieux et qui cache quelque chose. Well, just a few words about the way the Chinese population was perceived at the time. It was always considered apart from the other migrants or migrant communities of the time, and most of the Chinese population settled down in London and in Limehouse, which is an East End neighborhood. Chinese people were above all associated with opium, and opium was really a problem at the time. Well, I don't want, of course, to delve into the story or the history of opium and the opium wars between China and England, because it would be too much complex, and this is not the point of the lesson. But you have to know that opium had been introduced to Britain in the late 17th century, from China into Britain in the late 17th century. And initially, opium was not forbidden in England at all. It was used as, well, to make medicine, to make pills, if you want, or at least some pills. And England had a long history of opium trade with China. And when China in 1835 forbid the importation of, when the importation of opium was forbidden in 1835, an opium war was launched between England and China. So I'm not going to give the details of the different opium wars. There were several of them, but during these wars and after these wars, the opium trade, could resume. And during the 40s and the 60s and the 50s, Britain developed new uses for opium. Sometimes they even mixed opium with tobacco, for instance. And as they underestimated the strength of opium, either when it was mixed with tobacco or when it was used in medicine, many people became addicted to opium. So you had many opium addicts in late Victorian Britain. Even children sometimes were addicted to opium if they were, for instance, if they suffered from a disease and took opium as part of their pills, then you had children who were addicted to opium. So it was really a great problem in Victorian England. And the first regulation came in the late 60s with a Pharmacy Act, which aimed to limit the sale of opium to pharmacies, and especially unlicensed pharmacies. And what is characteristic of opium is that it was not, addiction to opium was not only reserved for the poor neighborhoods. Everybody, absolutely everybody was concerned, rich people, poor people alike, adults and children alike. And so there was this association between this phenomenon of opium addiction and the so-called danger of Chinese people.
it was considered that the Chinese people were responsible for the presence of opium, whereas, of course, it was the British who had imported the opium in the first place. So it was thought that they were responsible for the presence of opium, and that they were responsible, of course, for all what was called the opium dens, c'est-à-dire des espèces de bars malfamés où on fumait de l'opium. Vous savez, on les voit dans les films anciens avec des gens qui sont allongés puis qui fument leur opium. For all the opium dens that could be found, especially in the East End of London or in the poor neighborhoods. But the opium dens were also frequented by rich people. They went to the poor part of the city to be unrecognized and to smoke opium under disguise, if you want. You have an example in the picture of Dorian Gray. In one chapter, Dorian Gray is going to an opium den in the East End of London, and he's not disguised, but he's going there under disguise in a way. He doesn't want to be recognized because you were not supposed, of course, to go to the opium dens. So, as opium frightened people and fascinated them at the same time with this addiction that was developed around opium, Chinese people were also associated with both fascination and fear and repulsion in a way. And very often in the caricatures of the time or in the literature of the time, like, for instance, the Fu Manchu series, they were associated with a kind of big mafia dealing, of course, opium, and they were associated with what was called at the time the yellow peril, le péril jaune, on dit encore le péril jaune, même si c'est quand on se réfère à cette époque. So Chinese people were associated with mysterious people, inscrutable people. You know, the Oriental people, so inscrutable, so difficult to understand. So it was not their so-called ignorance that was stressed here. It was their danger, the fact that they were mysterious and so dangerous for other people. It was especially this which was said about Chinese people. So a different type of othering as far as Chinese people are concerned. Sax Rohmer, R-O-H-M-E-R, who is the author of the Fu Manchu series, not the films, but the books, capitalized on this fascination and fear of British people for Chinese people. He was a journalist, and he wrote the first book of the Fu Manchu stories, and it was such a success, such a phenomenal success, that he wrote, I don't know how many, but probably 20, 30 others for many, many years. And he wrote these books after an investigation, a journalistic investigation he made in the East End of London about the Chinese opium mafia, and he knew that this would interest people, and he played on the prejudices that people had about the Chinese population. So you see, such texts as the Fu Manchu series were also a way of making, well, the Chinese community more visible in the public sphere at the time when there were not so many Chinese people living on British soil. But once again, the representation that was made of the Chinese community was a completely distorted description, which influenced the way people thought about these Chinese others. Right? Bon, on va s'arrêter là parce que j'ai pas le temps. Je terminerai la semaine prochaine sur les Indiens, parce que là on a une immigration indienne qui était déjà importante à l'époque.